Hello, everybody, and welcome to Season 1, Episode 3 of the 85 Studios podcast. How is everybody today? My name is Elijah, and I am here with my bro,
Troyboy. How we doing, folks? We have a lot of good stories for you guys. You guys would be amazed. We have some good stuff for you guys and some scary stories that blow your mind. Here we go with some good stuff out there.
Are you ready to be afraid to walk out your door? Those of you who are in the house with a sensitive constitution, younger ears, you may want to get the kitties out of the room for this one, because some of the stories that we are about to tell here are going to be quite terrifying, and they will scare children. So unless you want kids in your bed sleeping with mom and dad today or tonight, you may want to get a handle on that for sure. So without further ado, let's just jump right in. Today's podcast is about haunted objects. So
And there is one in the room right now with us.
there are a couple of haunted objects right here in the room with us.
Look at that.
I hold in my hand right now
A knife.
a knife that was passed down from generation to generation.
This knife is always creeping me out. I've had this knife for several years. And this knife, let me tell you, it's creepy, okay? My dad had this knife back in the day, unshaved. And he said that he had this knife back in the military. He was in the military from 1978 till 1982. And from what I hear and what I feel from this knife, there are some things about this knife that I know are very out there. This weapon, I know, was used in combat. I feel that I saw several attacks. Several people were struck by this weapon of death. This weapon is a military weapon issued by the U.S. military, and as any military issued U.S. weapon, it has killed several people. You will feel that, understand that, and know that is true. According to our father, this knife, he used this weapon on several U.S. military applications. He used this actually in combat, and this is going based on what he had told me and my mother.
So I'm gonna go into my story. I was 13 years old, and I was talking to my dad. My parents had legally separated and were in the process of filing for divorce. My dad, we had visitation rights with, or he had visitation rights, so he would come and he would pick us up and he would take us to his place. And what we would do was we would go and see him for a while, and he noticed eventually that I had a lot of musical talent, and the situation was such that he started noticing that I was really good with my tenor saxophone. I had picked up tenor saxophone in middle school, and I was playing for band in the middle school. And so says, son, you have a lot of musical talent. You're really good with the sax and you're a really good singer. Have you ever tried guitar? So I said, I like guitar. I'm a classic rocker. I love music. Sure, I love guitar. Yeah, I'd love to learn how to play guitar, but I don't have a guitar. He says, well, I have a guitar that is sitting at my mom's house. My dad's mom, actually, would be my grandma. And she had a huge house out in Lindsborg, Kansas, which had a lot of his old belongings in it, heirlooms and things like that. And he says, I have this guitar, and it's been sitting and sitting and sitting for years and years. I've never played it. I couldn't play it when I was a kid. It was really difficult for me to pick up, so I just did never play it. And so he says, would you like if I were to bring that guitar over and let you have that guitar? If I give it to you, do you promise that you will take good care of it? And I said, yeah, I'll take the guitar. I'd be happy to take it. I want to learn it. That would be really cool. That would be one of the coolest things ever. So the next day, we had a weekend visitation. He goes over and he picks up the guitar, and it's an old guitar, a sparkly blue paint job on it, old Fender Stratocaster. And it's been sitting, it's from the 1960s. It's been sitting in an upstairs bedroom of my grandmother's house, my dad's mom, for, well, since he was 16, and he was in his early, or he was probably his mid-30s back then. The year was 1997, I believe. So he goes and he gets the guitar and he brings it out to me, and he brings it over, and I meet him at his apartment and we exchange the guitar. Well, I bring it over and I'm living with my mom, and I bring the guitar home, and it's an old guitar. It needs strings badly, and so I take it home. It's an old Fender Stratocaster from the 60s. It needs new strings, and the strings are all corroded and rusted out, so I don't get a chance to actually play it. I set it in the corner of my room, lean it against the wall, because I plan on going to the music store and getting some strings and learning how to tune it the next morning. That night, I had the most horrific dream that there was a man wearing a denim jacket and denim pants, short, dark hair, smoking a cigarette. He had the guitar in his hand. The man doesn't say anything to me. He just kind of nods. He's got greased up hair. He looks like somebody maybe from the 60s, early 60s kind of style. I get the feeling like he wants me to play this guitar. He wants me to learn this guitar. But once I wake up, I have this horrible, horrible sense of dread about the guitar. And I notice that it's not something that was there originally before I brought the guitar in. Now, the house that I was in, it was haunted already. There were multiple paranormal events that took place in the house. And my grandma's house, there were multiple horrible hauntings that took place in there as well. But the feeling after I woke up was so strong that I couldn't go back to sleep, and I had to go to school the next morning because it was a Monday, and I was in high school. I was a freshman. I couldn't sleep the rest of that night, and I was extremely tired the rest of my shift. And so I told my mom, Dad gave me this guitar so that I could restring it. And now I can't sleep because I get this feeling in my room like something's really wrong. And the first night, I didn't get rid of it because I couldn't. I couldn't get a hold of my dad because he was working the 4 to midnight shift, and I had school, and we were forced to go to bed early because we were kids. I was 13. So I ended up finally having to sneak the guitar back over to his house, to his apartment. I thought about leaving it there, but I thought maybe somebody would steal it, so I didn't want to leave it there. I stayed out, and I stayed out until around midnight. I remember going to the park, and a bunch of my friends were there. I had this guitar, this old guitar. 2 or 3 of my friends were there. We always used to hang out at the park. And when they saw that I had the guitar, I didn't have an amp or anything. They were asking me if they could play it or if I could play it. And I told them what was going on with the nightmares that I was having of this person and feeling this presence of this guitar. And then I was waiting for my dad to get home, but for some reason he never showed up at home. So I ended up going back home with the guitar because I didn't want to just leave it outside at his apartment complex, and I didn't have a way in. I didn't have a key or anything like that. So I took it back home. There was one more night that I stayed in that room with that guitar because I had nowhere else to put it. I was having fierce nightmares that were relentless. And I remember when I woke up because that guitar, a string had actually plucked itself, waking me up from a dead sleep, heart racing in a cold sweat. I went back to my dad's house that night. I snuck out of my window. I took the guitar with me. I knew he was off work. I didn't know if he would be home. I ran all the way across town to his apartment, and I dropped the guitar at his doorstep. I knocked on the door, and I told him when he answered, "It was a nice thought, but I can't sleep with this thing in my possession, and I can't sleep with it in the same room." I told him about the string plucking. I told him about the nightmares. I told him everything. And he took the guitar back. He put it back in my grandma's house on the 2nd floor. And that was the last that I heard of it. When my grandma died in 2006, all of the possessions that were in the house were divided up and auctioned off. The house was sold. I imagine the guitar was most likely one of those items, and so was the man who was attached to it. The evil spirit and the presence. My best theory on it is that even though there may have not been anything attached to the guitar itself, even though somebody may have not died who possessed the guitar, it's possible that something evil may have attached itself to the guitar from the location that it had sat abandoned for 20 years or more. But the truth is, we'll never know. And there's no way to find out.
This story is weird. You buy a fridge, okay? It's not supposed to be haunted, is it? You buy a normal object, a normal appliance. What are the odds of it being ever anything being normal beyond haunted? Everybody buys everything used, don't they? especially in this poor economy we live in. I got this thing from free, basically free. We moved it in, me and my brother, in a house that I got for really cheap. We thought, okay, this thing is free, no big deal. 1970s, but when we first moved it in, we felt something about it. There's something weird about this place. We felt that right away, didn't we, bro?
Yes.
So we felt something weird about this thing. It's a fridge. It's a yellow fridge from 1972. No big deal, right? Well, we moved it in, put the doors on.
We had taken the doors off to make the fridge lighter so that we could move it.
But yet, at the same time, we had moved it in the spot where the old fridge was before that. And I bought this house really cheap that was abandoned before that. And there was a strange feeling about that fridge. It makes no sense to anyone else. But yeah, that fridge had a creepy, creepy feeling about it. There's something evil about that fridge. We have done EVPs since. There's something attached to that fridge beyond anything we ever recorded before. It's there.
The year was 2006. I was a full-time college student, trying to make ends meet and scraping together a pretty much meager existence. I had no money. I had no time to do anything but go to school. I was taking 13 credit hours, going to college, a small community college that I could afford on a Pell Grant. I didn't have the time to go out and buy a new fancy alarm clock, but I needed something to keep time so that I could keep track of things. I was using my cell phone, which is a piece of junk kind of flip phone. Back in the day, that was all I had. I was using Cricket for service. So while I was home, I couldn't get my alarms to go off. I only stored one alarm. I was unable to keep time, so I had to keep track of time. So I wanted something that I could look at across the room or across the house, across the apartment, so that I could see what time it was at all times. I went down to King Super, and even though it's a grocery store, sometimes they had objects out there that you could buy, just little items like clocks and cutlery and things like that, just odds and ends. I went and I found this clock, a large clock, a 12-hour clock, analog clock. I paid a pretty good chunk of money for it. I think it was around $26 to $30, which to me back then was quite a bit of money. I brought it home, and instantly I got a very strange feeling about it. I ended up putting it up on the wall, but I didn't feel anything about it when I purchased it initially. Not inside the grocery store, nothing. My best thoughts on this is that it's possible that something may have attached itself to the clock, because while it wasn't something where I got any strange feelings about the clock itself until much later, it seemed like ever since I brought the clock home, bad luck followed me everywhere I went. Everything from failing my classes to having my vehicles break down to even getting into some trouble with minor legal things such as tags and that kind of stuff, to having my dad get kicked out of the same college and then being guilty by association and being kicked out of the college myself. At that point, I ended up having to leave Colorado. I ended up having to take a $3,000 loan on a student loan to be able to cover my expenses so that I could still continue to go to classes, and even then afterwards being kicked out of the school by the campus police because of something that somebody else had done, and I was guilty by association with my own dad. I ended up eventually losing my apartment because of circumstances beyond my control and not having enough money, and getting placed on a list where I couldn't get an apartment to rent or live in for 3 years. I ended up living in my car in the Walmart parking lot and taking a job at the Walmart. And eventually, as it got colder and colder in October, I ended up leaving my girlfriend, who I absolutely loved with all of my heart and soul, and moving back to Kansas. I moved in with my brother because my stepfather would not allow me to move back in with my mom even temporary. I ended up taking the clock with me everywhere I went. When it wasn't in my possession, not as many horrible things happened, not as much bad luck, but when it was in my possession, if it was ever hanging anywhere near me in the apartment, if it was in my car, if it was around me, if somebody else had it near me, horrible things would happen. It was like a cursed clock. Now, I don't know if this falls under the category necessarily of haunted items or haunted objects so much as it does cursed objects and cursed items. But I will tell you, when I brought it back to my camper after I had to move in with my mom and move into her backyard in my camper after I bought a small camper, I hung it up on the wall because I still didn't believe that it was the clock. I thought maybe it was just bad luck. So I ended up putting it up on the wall, and shortly thereafter, my mother lost her house and we all had to move. It basically separated and destroyed our entire family. Now, all of these things could be chalked up to coincidence because several events occurred during that time that could have possibly caused that kind of anomaly. But if you think about bad luck in spurs like that, in straight lines like that, something would have had to have added it together to cause that kind of bad luck. Once I got rid of the clock, it seemed like the bad luck ceased. Altogether, slowly. It came to the point where eventually less and less horrible things were happening to me, to my family, and to my friends after I got rid of the clock. Now, I do know that it got worse after I was experimenting with a Ouija board when I had the clock in the room with me. However, I will say that getting rid of that clock was one of the best decisions that I had ever made. But I also say that the clock was brand new when I bought it. I literally bought it from a source, a grocery store, brand new. It wasn't secondhand. It couldn't have had anything attached to it. However, you never know, even with new items, with new objects, if it's going to be something that is possessed, cursed, or haunted. So be careful, friends.
Hello, friends. And I have a story for you. I bought a shotgun back in late 2018. And this shotgun was an old shotgun from 1928. A 5-shot Remington 3 2/4 shells shotgun. A standard issue shotgun with a long barrel. Now, me and a few friends of mine had taken that shotgun out to see if it was good for hunting. But no matter what they shot with that shotgun, it was too much of a straight pattern and too much of an accurate shotgun. Even though the sights, you had no basic sights on that gun. Basically, all you had in that gun was just two little, curves inside the barrel. Little ball. That's all you had for aiming. I bought that gun back in 2018. And when I bought that gun, I lived in a little apartment that was upstairs. Now, the thing was about that thing, I only paid like $300 for that gun. $300 for that little gun. And I thought, okay, well, I have an antique shotgun, so what? Well, at first it was okay. And I had hung that thing up as an antique in my apartment. No big deal, I thought. But then I had nightmares about a sheriff's officer who was shot and killed back in the 1930s. And the nightmares kept continuing. And I kept seeing this officer being shot. Back then, back in the 1930s, they kept these big shotguns in the trunk of their cars. I knew that from history I had read. But for some reason, I don't know if it's real or not, I kept seeing this man that was shot and killed. It was a sheriff for the same county, a sheriff's county officer that was shot back in the early 1930s. I ignored that, but I kept feeling that feeling like he was there. He was haunting me. He was breathing over my neck when I was sleeping in the same room. It drove me to madness. I kept feeling depressed. I had a good job to begin with, and the job I had was a factory job. At first, all was going well, but then I started feeling like I was sick all of a sudden. I was feeling sick for no reason. I felt like I had pneumonia. I went to a doctor, and turns out I had a sinus infection. Okay, no big deal, so I thought. But then, things got weirder. When I went back to work, it was okay. But then, my muscles started feeling weak all of a sudden. I had actually taken vacation time in the time frame. I started feeling like sick, like there was something there around me. Sick, like something had hurt me. And it was in my right shoulder. The same shoulder where that spirit had showed me that he'd been shot. I kept having nightmares about this guy. This officer had been shot in the shoulder, the right shoulder, the same shoulder where I had felt this pain. And then my left arm felt like it had been hurt for some reason. My right shoulder had gone numb. The feelings beyond that got worse. I had eventually put that shotgun in the closet. It was unloaded at that point. I felt like there was something there. I had hid that shotgun away, and my injuries that I thought were there went away. Yet I felt like I was being hurt still by something. I couldn't feel it, I couldn't see it. In the end, what happened was beyond me. It asked me, this man, this spirit, this officer asked me, turns out to be a demon. This demonic entity showed itself to me in full force. It asked me to kill myself. I felt it in full strength. And that is what drove me to attempt. But something stopped me there. It stopped me. Something stopped me in my own apartment. I had the shotgun. But in the end, what stopped me was my own well-being. The fact is, there is something evil attached to that shotgun. I still have this to this day. In the end, everything I felt about that rifle was all a lie. It was all a demon trying to get in my head. And that object was haunted, yes. But that demon was real. It lied to me to get me to feel how I felt. And that's why I say, guns and rifles, anything you buy, mirrors especially, they all have iron in them. They all reflect the things. Had a lot of energy in it. That energy was demonic. And demons often control these things. And as I was fooled, I tell you, I'll never fall for it again. I still have that rifle. But that demon is gone now.
Now that we've told you a few stories, personal stories, true stories of our lives, about some of the haunted objects that we have encountered in our time, I think it's time to tell of something that happened that affected both of us. In fact, our entire family.
Upon moving into a new house, the year was 1996. I remember the feeling of pure evil and dread. My mother and my father were in a very turbulent relationship. Things were very unusual.
The house was immaculate. It was absolutely beautiful inside. The woodwork on the walls and the tops of the doorways was homemade and crafted in beautiful dark pine. Along with the crafted paneling and the trim were crafted 3 wooden ducks that were stained to match the trim around the doorway between the living room and the kitchen.
It was a 1970s amazement. Although it was an early 1970s house, it was very beautiful in its own way. But in the darkness lurked some very dark spirits. And unfortunately, a lot of things lurked in the house as well.
Indirectly attached to an object in the house was a spirit so malevolent and so evil we could not fathom what was about to happen.
When we took these ducks down from the top of the kitchen, there was a very nice awning that was built in the kitchen. It was like a panel that was exactly like 2 inches, if I remember right. Do you remember that, bro?
Yeah, when we took these ducks down, we ended up removing them and noticing that the paint behind them was actually faded around them.
Yeah.
But behind them, they had never been moved. It looked like they hadn't been moved in years and years and years.
What was weird about that was we felt like there was something behind that. Like, we felt energy behind that. And we couldn't explain it. Like, there was something evil there. But yet, the energy was within the walls. It's very hard to explain, but if you ever live in a place that had a lot of death or a lot of evil, it's hard to explain. Like, there was something there. Like, there was something very dark.
An ominous and malevolent force.
It was beyond us. And when we moved those ducks, it felt like whatever we had moved, it felt like they had, like, unleashed, right? Like, whatever it was we had moved, it had unleashed itself.
Objects started moving by themselves in both the kitchen.
The fan, too. The fan was spinning.
Mm-hmm. The ceiling fan started moving by itself, and
it was
not powered on at the time.
And you know what's scary about that? I was 2 years old. Moved there back in 1996. Mom and our father had moved in. They first had moved boxes in, those kind of things. They were in the garage at that time. And Mom had felt like there was something in that room with her. Like, she had felt like there was something evil in there. According to what our mother had said to us, she said that she felt something evil in there. And she said that to our father. And our father was always in denial.
He always had a habit of blowing her off, as if, yeah, well, what do you know, kind of thing. You know,
Mom had
I don't
said,
sense anything here.
Mom had said that she had felt something very ominous and dark and evil in the house, and she had felt like there was something behind her in the garage. And Dad said, well, I don't feel it here, but, you know, it could be anything. Dismissed it in his mind. But I know Dad felt it too.
Upon moving those ducks, because they didn't look like they belonged there,
And they were handcrafted beautifully, too. They were very well handcrafted. They had the eyes and the holes for the eyes and the wings, and they were very well chiseled together.
We thought that maybe they would look better in a different spot in the house. So we moved them, thinking that, we weren't going to destroy them or get rid of them. Something started attacking us. And this was the very first paranormal activity we had experienced in this house. The first of several.
Do you remember the nightmares that first hit us?
All of us were having vivid, horrifying nightmares in the night after that.
These nightmares were just beyond. I mean, they were just very strange. Like, I remember as a kid, okay, I'll share my story first on this. My first nightmare, I was 3 years old. This strange creature that was a very dark shadow with red eyes choked me out in my sleep. It had choked me in my sleep, and then I woke up screaming. And then after that, Mom decided to have me sleep on the couch, watching TV the whole night, because I was screaming every night with this horrifying creature in my sleep that was choking me out. And in the end, I didn't have my own room. I was sleeping in the same area where my mom was.
Now, upon moving those ducks back, exactly where they were, because we could see where the paint had faded in the shape of those ducks. The original paint had faded, all but where those ducks were. So we moved them back. We finally figured it out. When did this start? We got to talking as a family. We collaborated and thought about this. We thought this through. We figured out that none of this had started until we moved those ducks. And upon moving them back, the activity still, while it hadn't ceased entirely, it calmed down enough that we could actually sleep again. That we could actually function as a family again. I think something happened to my dad there, our dad, where it snapped him into a reality that there was something wrong, and there was something there, but we don't know what. I had touched on this briefly in the previous story about the clock. What had happened was I had moved into the house with my mom. The year was roughly 2009 or 2010, I believe. And I had basically taken over the room in the north side of the house.
Yeah.
One night, I woke up and I felt a deep sense of dread. And I felt like something was watching me, something ominous, something evil. That room was the closest to the garage. On the other side of the wall was the garage. And I didn't know exactly what was going on. I woke up in a cold sweat after having nightmares. I bolted awake. I was jolted hard awake. And when I woke up, I felt like something was there with me. I could hear things moving in the room, but I couldn't see anything because it was pitch black. I laid back down, and I kind of did what a child would do, even though I was older. I was maybe 23, 24 years old. A man of that age typically doesn't go running to mom, even though he's living in mom's house. A man of that age will try to discover a discernible explanation or give themselves some form of explanation, a normal explanation for something like that. Maybe I'm being paranoid. Maybe I ate something before I went to bed that might be a disagreement with my stomach. Maybe I'm just freaked out. Maybe it's a nightmare. It's just a nightmare. Go to bed. Go back to sleep. I laid back down, but I couldn't shake the feeling like I was being watched, and like something was there. And I kept hearing things move in the room. And I kept hearing things like cans, like tin cans, pop cans, moving around as if somebody were kicking them. Very subtle, very quiet, but you could hear them. I laid back down and tried to ignore the problem. I woke back up, and the covers were over my head. It was even darker, and I felt like I was being smothered by my blanket. I started to pull the blanket off of my face, and I was laying flat on my back, with my face staring up at this blanket that was over my head and covering my face, my mouth, and my nose. I tried to pull the blanket off, but it felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. I couldn't move it. It felt like it was being held in place by some strange force. Before I knew what had happened or what was going on, and mind you, time was feeling like it was slow, but it must have been happening in real time. There's no way that it couldn't have been. I felt hands upon my throat. It felt like a full-grown man had grabbed me by my throat with the covers over my head and just started strangling me and choking the life out of me. I couldn't breathe. I couldn't scream. I couldn't yell. I couldn't do anything. I couldn't move. It felt like they were sitting on top of my chest and strangling me.
You know, bro, that same feeling. I felt that before. I was in your old bedroom. Remember your old bedroom you had?
Yes.
That old bedroom in the corner. Remember you had that closet door that had no doorknob on it? It was taped off. Remember that? Remember that?
Yeah, I do.
I felt the same thing. I was sleeping there one night. I had a queen-size bed. And I felt like there was something watching me through that closet doorknob. Do you remember that? That same feeling you had to you. The same feeling you had. Something was watching you, wasn't it?
Yes. And I also stayed in that same room, and that's a different room. That is the southwest room, the very southwest corner of the house. The same room that both of us had at separate times during our childhood and our teenage years.
Now, mind you, I was very innocent as a kid. I tried to avoid these things. I didn't believe in ghosts when I was a kid. And our stepfather figure at the time convinced me that these things did not exist. I felt very violated by this thing. I was sleeping there one night. This had been many years before that. I pulled the covers over my head to avoid this thing. And all of a sudden, all the air was sucked out from under the covers. And the pressure was high. It felt like I was being choked. There was no air between the covers and me. And I was being choked. I felt a weight on my neck, like there was something there. When I lifted the covers off of my face, I saw something that I will never forget. And that was a demon. I saw this figure, a black figure with red eyes. Looked like smoke. Like black smoke with red eyes. And it had a face. like a weird pug face. Looked like a pig almost, but a pug face with big eyes, big red eyes. It was smiling at me, and it had these long arms that were made of smoke that were choking me by my neck. I prayed, and when I prayed, closed my eyes and prayed, it went away, but the feeling of it being there was still there.
Similarly, that is also how I managed to get this thing to get off of me. I closed my eyes. I couldn't move. I said, okay, Lord, take me into your arms. If I am going to die, nobody is going to know what caused my death. They're going to think that I asphyxiated in my sleep somehow, or suffocated for no reason.
Let me say the Lord's Prayer. Our Father, who art in heaven,
Hallowed be thy name.
Thy kingdom come.
Thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil.
That prayer saved our lives those 2 nights.
After saying the Lord's Prayer, I heard a growl, a very deep, throaty growl, like no animal I've ever heard in my life. The covers, the tension loosened, and suddenly I was able to move. I threw the covers off of me, and I looked around. Darkness, nothing but darkness. I stayed awake the rest of the night. I turned the lights on, and I just sat there. I was looking around, my heart racing in my chest, until the light of the morning came, and my mom woke up, and I could hear her alarm clock going off. I walked into the living room, and I told her what happened. I showed her the marks on my neck, and there were marks. They looked like human hands on my neck, beet red and bruised. I told her I will never sleep in this room again. I will never sleep in this house again, and take the risk of having this occur twice. So the next day, I was talking to one of my friends who had a camper for sale, and I had nowhere else to go. I had no money. My job was paying me garbage wage, minimum. I bought this camper with money that I had saved up, and I put it in the backyard of my mom's house. And I stayed in that camper for almost a year. Maybe a little bit more than a year.
Do you remember what happened after that? Do you remember the day that our own brother decided to leave the house? Now, our brother that is in between our ages decided to go on to college. And he decided to move on. He was going to move on campus. He had found a place to live. Some very strange things happened before that, between times. But my point is on this. When my brother Elijah had moved out, he had moved into a camper in the backyard place, back property. And it was a very large property in the back. At first, everything was okay. We always kept that door shut in that room that he always slept in that was near the garage. And we always kept a curtain between the glass patio and that little glass room that led to the backyard. we would always see these weird figures that would appear in that patio glass. But we always ignored them. Now, the day of him leaving, something very evil, very concentrated would appear, and we felt that. We felt something was there. And my mother ignored it. My brother ignored it. My other brother was in the back property. He felt it too, but he would always say, I'm okay, I'm safe here. He invited me to stay the night there, that particular night. Remember that?
Mm-hmm.
And I had been playing video games. I was only about, gosh, how old was I? Like 18, 19 years old at the time?
Maybe you were 16 or 17.
No, I was out of high school at that point.
You were. You were fresh out of high school. You were maybe
Fresh out of high
18.
school, 18 years old, I believe. I remember right. I've been playing a lot of games, a lot of violent video games, and we all slept, not in our bedrooms, but all in the same room, because there was something that would not let us sleep in our own bedrooms. There's something very evil there at that point. My mom slept on the couch, my brother slept on the chair. I slept in the middle of the living room floor. Now, the story behind that, my mom slept on the couch, and my brother slept on a chair. And my other brother slept in a camper that he had purchased behind the house in a very big lot. I personally did not sleep in my own bedroom. We did not sleep in our own bedrooms because there was something that was very evil there that would not let us sleep in our own bedrooms at that point. My brother Elijah was a prime example of what happens when you sleep in your own bedroom in the house, alone by yourself. There's some kind of evil, demonic thing that will attack you in your sleep. Now, this particular night was the last night that my brother, my youngest brother, my brother that was closest to my age, was going on to college, his last night there. In the far corner in the kitchen, there was a chandelier. And in the chandelier, it was an old chandelier from like the early 1970s, maybe 1960s, maybe older. It had one light and 6 small little miniature lights that were smaller. And that light was on. And I remember I was laying down in my sleeping bag. We had 2 cats at the time, or 3 cats at the time. The other 2 cats were hidden somewhere, but the one cat was an older cat, and she kind of hid under the couch. I felt her there under the couch. All of a sudden, within a blink of an eye, I felt some powerful evil energy. And that evil energy, for some reason, started at the back of the house, toward the kitchen. Now, what makes no sense to me at all is, and this may not make any sense to you at all either, but there was a very strong evil feeling there. It made that light in the back of the kitchen chandelier glow bright. It became so bright that it was blinding to look at. Yet that was an old incandescent light bulb. It was so bright that it was blunt to look at. It was so bright that you couldn't look at it. It was so bright. And then there was like this weird kind of like mist in the air that traveled forward. Now, that mist would travel forward towards you, and it traveled forward toward us, slowly. And I was crying, I was so scared, but I couldn't move at the same time. It slowly traveled toward us, and the first thing it hit was my legs. It hit my legs first. And all I could feel was this paralyzing demonic energy that was beyond anything I ever felt in my life. It was so powerful, I couldn't move, I couldn't breathe. It had taken the air out of my lungs. It hit me first, and all I could do was scream. All I could do was scream. I could gasp. That's all I could do. Couldn't even breathe it in. It hit me first.
You're screaming in your mind. But your
I
body...
was screaming in my mind, yes. My body, though,
No
was
sound.
silent. It hit me, and then it hit my brother. It hit my mom as well. My brother had pulled the covers away when he heard me screaming finally, when I could finally get some air. He pulled the covers away and he said it was static. All I could see was static, like static from a TV screen, in his eyes is all I could see. My mom was screaming she felt pure evil. And in the end, what we felt was pure evil hitting us. It was beyond anything I could explain. My brother that lived in the camper behind the house could hear us screaming. And that's all I remember. The last day, my middle brother, before he had left the house.
I was asleep in the camper in the backyard. I had all the lights off. And I remember it was maybe 3 o'clock in the morning. I thought everybody had gone to bed, and I had gone to sleep myself, because I knew that I had to work in the morning early. Troy came out to the backyard, panicked. He looked like he'd seen, forgive the expression, a ghost. He was white as a sheet. He had an expression on his face like pure terror, pure, unadulterated terror, like I've never seen before on him. Troy's a brave person. He's always been brave. He's always been strong. Never before had I seen that much fear in his eyes. He wakes me up. He knocked on the door of the camper, woke me up, and I was like, who's there? What's going on? I see Troy, and he tells me what happened. And at first, I was kind of shocked, but then I was half asleep, and I realized, remembering what had happened to me, whatever this is something very powerful. It attacked 3 people all at once. And I remembered how strong it was when it attacked me. I got up, I got dressed, I followed Troy back to the house. Everybody was awake. The lights were all on. And we stayed awake all night. The 4 of us stayed up all night talking about what had happened, trying to figure out why it happened, and how we could do something to prevent it from happening again. At that point, my mother suggested selling the house. And all of us were like, where are we going to go? What are we going to do? Well, if we don't sell the house, it's not like we can sleep in any of the bedrooms. It's not like we're not sleeping in one room now. It's not like I can sleep in the house at all. I'm living in a camper in the backyard, plugged into an extension cord for power and heat. It's winter. So we decided that we were going to sell the house. But first we decided we were going to have to fix up the house so that it would look good for potential buyers. But we never did get to sell the house. The house had other plans. Thank you all so very much for watching and listening to our podcast and all of the stories here. If you have any contributions you would like to add, please feel free to give us a comment down in the comment section below. Follow us on Facebook and on Twitter. All of the links are in the description. And we will see you all in the next episode.
Thank you so much for watching. I hope this chilled your spines in the right kind of way.
Please be sure to like, subscribe, and share these videos with your friends so we can grow our channel. If you like our content, please let us know.
Thank you so much for watching.
And be true to yourselves. Good night, everybody. Pleasant dreams.